Have you ever been so sure you knew what was wrong with a plant that you stopped looking for other possibilities? That was me with my yard-long beans this spring. They showed classic mosaic virus symptoms. I saw yellowing leaves, distorted growth, and I even saw the aphids all over the plant. The problem was, the internet says the only cure for mosaic virus is pulling the plant out of the garden. So before I pulled an entire crop out of the garden, I decided to double check and sent a sample to the IFAS Plant Diagnostics lab in Gainesville. The results surprised me, and they taught me an important lesson about diagnosing problems in the garden. The very first step when you're trying to diagnose is to make some really good observations about the plant. Look at the stem and the top and the underside of the leaves, and even the roots if you can. Sometimes you can try to move the soil around and take a look at the top layer of roots. Sometimes you're willing to pull the plant. It just depends on your garden situation. You're going to write down things like yellowing leaves and be specific about how they're yellowing. Is it yellow in patches, or is it yellow all around, or is it green veins? Be very specific here. Also write down any of the bugs you might see. A lot of times the bugs are one of the strongest indicators of what's happening to the plant. I've had experiences where I've seen multiple diseases on the same plant, so make sure you write down as many observations as possible. For these yard-long beans, I wrote down yellowing leaves, distorted growth, curling leaves, aphids, and I even saw some leaves with some brown circles on them, so I wrote that down as well. Remember, the more observations you can make at this stage, the better off you'll be. A lot of diseases and pest issues and even nutrient deficiencies have very similar plant symptoms. My next step is usually to do a reverse Google image search, and I'll show you how to do that on the screen if you don't know how to do it. I will pull up a browser on my phone, a Google Chrome browser, and then I'll open up a tab of Google Search, and I'll see on the right side of the search bar a camera button. I click that, and then I go into my photo library and I choose a photo that shows and represents well what's happening on my plant. Then you can press search and it'll give you an AI description of what's going on with your plant, or what's most likely going on with your plant. In my case, it said it was most likely a mosaic virus. And then when I look further and read further about a mosaic virus, I learn that it's caused by the bite of an infected aphid, which made sense because my next photo I had was aphids all over the bean plant. So a reverse Google image search and an AI answer is going to be close, and it's going to be a clue, but it's not necessarily the answer. If you're really trying to be precise about diagnosing what's going on with your plant, there's a few other things that we can do. I usually will go into two primary places to read more about the diseases. I'm here in Florida, so I reach for IFAS website publications. A lot of times you can Google IFAS, bean plant, yellowing leaves, and read about it. If you're in Florida, a lot of the information in a IFAS publication is going to be relevant to you because these are the most common diseases and pest problems that are present here in our state. I also tend to use a book like this one. This is the Organic Gardener's Handbook of Natural Pest and Disease Control. This is more like, I use it more like supporting information. It doesn't usually have all of the images that I want. It doesn't always have enough treatment options listed. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's my only thing that I use, but I do use it. So as I was reading through these publications and reading through this book, my suspicions about the diagnosis kept getting stronger and stronger, and I was becoming more and more confident that it was a mosaic virus. Now my last step was to send a sample to the IFAS Plant Diagnostics lab in Gainesville. The reason I wanted to do this was, well, there's multiple reasons. So I am trying to get better at diagnosing plants. I'm trying to build my skills over time, and I need some sort of confirmation that I'm right as I'm learning, right? Maybe a few years down the road I won't need to do that plant diagnostics test, but right now I felt like I really needed to confirm what was going on and test my process of diagnosing plants. And also, I wanted to share this experience with you. I was really hoping that I could come on here and tell you how, a reverse Google image search or even a message on a Facebook group, something like that could be really beneficial. And boy, was I surprised when I got the results. So let me walk you through how I took the sample and I sent it off to the lab, and then we'll get into exactly what happened when I got the results back. Today I'm collecting the sample to send off to the IFAS Plant Diagnostics lab. And I think I'm going to go with this particular plant because it's definitely showing signs of mosaic virus. And actually I just found what appears to be a big collection of aphids right here. And then I'm also seeing several leaves with what looks to be a leaf spot bacterial disease. And so I think if I collect this particular plant, they'll be able to diagnose both issues. Let me give you a closer look of the plant, and then I'm going to put it in the bag. Let's take a look at this particular bean plant right here. I think it shows a lot of the problems. This is the newest growth, the tip. When we come down, work your way down, you see yellowing and mottled leaves. Mosaic virus is what it appears to be. Then we see this big collection of aphids right here. It's actually really pretty gross. More mosaic virus. And then it looks like we also have some bacterial leaf spot disease going on. Oops. I don't think I was supposed to break that leaf. Let's go forward with our sample collection. I'm going to just provide 2 plants. It does say shake off the excess. The roots look okay. I am going to put it in my Ziploc bag. It says keep just enough soil to keep the roots moist. I'm just going to add a little bit back in just to be sure. Now we need to put this in a container and ship it off. The first level of testing was a basic culture, and it only tests for some plant diseases and not all. So I was really surprised when I received the results and it said Fusarium root rot, which is a fungus in the soil, and also Phomopsis leaf spot, which is another fungus, but it's on the foliage. Nowhere listed in the results did it say a virus. So I got on the phone with one of the scientists there, and I told her what I was expecting the results to say and how I was very surprised that it wasn't in the results. And she agreed that it was surprising because everything kind of lines up, the Google search and the aphids. So she mentioned that she can do an even more extensive test called a PCR test. And it would be an additional $60 or $80, I think, to run the test. And it would test for even more viruses than the initial test. So I said, yes, absolutely. I want to be sure that it's not a mosaic virus, if it's actually not a mosaic virus. So she ran the test and got back to me about a week later and confirmed absolutely no viruses are present on this plant. And it's Fusarium root rot and it's Phomopsis leaf spot. So in this example, everything up until this lab test pointed towards a mosaic virus. And it wasn't until I spent like $150 total to diagnose the plant that I got to the root of the problem. Now, I'm not trying to say that you need a lab test all the time, but if you're like me and you're trying to get better at learning this skill over time, Something like this taught me to be skeptical about the results from the free tools. A lot of our plant symptoms from different diseases or pests or even nutrient deficiencies, they all have overlapping symptoms. And if you diagnose it wrong, then your treatment or your control is going to be wrong. Now, in a sense, I was lucky because I waited until I received all these results to even think about pulling the plants. And in the meantime, I was harvesting a lot of yard-long beans, and it was a very productive plant, surprising to me. But if I were to boil it down to a few steps to try to properly diagnose your plants, I would recommend definitely jot down all of your early observations, every single thing that you see, including what might be going on in your soil. And then you're going to want to reach for any of those free tools to help give you a clue and get you closer and closer to a diagnosis. Then do some more reading on trusted websites like IFAS publications or a book like this one, or even some Facebook groups I find are very helpful. And if you're strongly interested in properly diagnosing and you're willing to spend some money, I would highly recommend doing some laboratory testing. Now, it's not cheap though. I had to spend, I think, like $40 or $50 to overnight the soil sample. Then I paid $40, I think, for the initial level testing. And then it was an additional $80 for the PCR test. So I really, by the end of it, was spending around or maybe a little over $150. I'd love to hear some other resources that you use to diagnose plants, or even some other methods that you might recommend to get you even closer to a plant diagnosis. I think this is something that's very hard when it comes to gardening, and it's something that we have to learn over time. There's just no way around it. It's going to take time to learn what happens to different crops in your area, what pests are most prominent for those crops, and even what types of diseases are the most prominent for that plant. And personally, I think it's one of the hardest things about gardening, but it's also one of the most fun parts for me. I like to kind of test and try things and try to diagnose and then test if I'm right or not. And this was a great learning experience for me. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.